Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto. I'm a photographer. Welcome to another video. Today I'm gonna take a photo walk with this brand new, extremely tiny Viltrox 28mm F4.5 full frame lens for Sony E-mount cameras. I think this lens looks really super nice, and look how tiny it is. It's the tiniest lens, probably the smallest, most compact lens you can get for any full frame camera with autofocus. It comes with autofocus, so it's not one of those toy manual focus lenses that you usually see when they are as small as this. Let's see if this is any good. When I said this is tiny, I really meant it. This is probably like 1 centimeter, 10 millimeters long. It only protrudes from the camera body very little. Even the grip on my Sony A7 Mark IV is like taller than the lens. And this weighs in only about 60 grams. 60 grams, it's almost nothing. The feature set is quite basic, but there is a built-in lens cap, which is really nice. No filter thread, of course, no manual focus ring, and no other controls, just the built-in lens cap. But that's enough. I think you can't expect all kinds of controls and buttons and switches when the lens is so tiny as this. There's one more feature worth mentioning, and it is the fixed f4.5 aperture. Yeah, this lens does not have aperture blades at all. Maybe because this lens is so small, maybe they couldn't fit in the blades and the actuator anymore. Maybe the autofocus system takes up all the space. It's not such a big deal. If you use shutter or aperture priority with auto ISO, you're pretty much good to go when it comes to exposure. Another minor issue with the fixed aperture is that in bright light like today, I can't choose a longer shutter speed. I just have to take what is given to me because I can't change the aperture at all. Today I'm experimenting a little bit. I'm shooting from the hip most of my pictures, and it's a fun technique that I don't use often because I prefer to frame and compose my shots with a little bit more precision. But shooting from the hip is quite a lot of fun, and I like the element of surprise there because you can't frame your shots perfectly when you're shooting from the hip without looking through your camera. My first attempts were out of focus because I used the same focusing mode I use when I look through the viewfinder, but it won't work with that technique. When I chose the large focus area, I started to get properly focused pictures too. A lot of fun. I highly recommend you give it a shot if you have never tried it before. Before this photo walk, I took some simple test pictures just to see if this lens is any good, because I had my doubts for such a tiny, inexpensive lens. The price is, I think, $99 US. Sometimes these lenses tend to be so optically inferior or toy-like that they are almost not worth experimenting with at all. But I found out that this lens is actually quite sharp, especially in the mid part of the frame. Only the corners are a little bit soft and there's quite a lot of vignetting too, but those only add to the character of the lens, in my opinion. And I really like the rendering of this lens. The results are really pleasing to my eye, at least. This is exactly the lens that Panasonic should have made for their S9 camera as an alternative kit lens. This makes so much more sense than a manual focus fixed f8 lens. This is so much more consumer friendly than a manual focus lens. It's too bad this is not available for other mounts than the Sony E mount. But maybe in the future Viltrox decides to make this available also for some other mounts, but so far only us Sony shooters can enjoy this incredibly tiny pancake lens. The autofocus speed is not super ultra fast, but in my opinion at least easily sufficient for street shooting. And it makes this lens so much more usable compared to a fully manual lens, similar lens. I have the 7 Artisan's 35mm F4.5. It's a fully manual lens. And with that lens you have to keep adjusting the focus distance all the time constantly, because a 35mm at f4.6 doesn't have that much depth of field that you could rely on hyperfocal distance. And it makes that lens really not very practical for street shooting. But with this you can pretty much nail the shot every time, as long as you figure out the right focus mode for your camera and for your shooting style. I really like this lens for street shooting. It's fun, it's inexpensive, and I think the rendering characteristics of this lens, they suit really well for street photography. Maybe it's not a good lens or the best lens for landscape shooter or something like that, but for street it's a super fun lens and highly recommended. And it would even make more sense on a more compact camera body like the A7C or C Mark II. But even with this A7 Mark IV, it feels like I'm just holding the camera body and no lens at all, because it feels like that. And look how small the lens is. You can hardly even tell that there is a lens mounted on the camera body. I hope you enjoyed this photo walk with the Viltrox 28mm F4.5 extra super tiny lens. Thanks so much for joining in, and I certainly hope to see you soon in the next video.